the No Boundaries radio show may contain adult material and coarse language. Listener discretion is advised.
Mick Scott from Seedspot Kill, and I want you to know that I'm listening to one of the coolest shows on the planet. This is No Boundaries Radio, and we're glad to have you. Better wear a cup.
This is Gabrielle Faust, and you're listening to No Boundaries Radio, where all the vampires hang out late at night.
Hi there, this is the artist, Mike Bliss. I'm over here in London, and I'm here to tell you that No Boundaries Radio has gone global and is drawing listeners from all over the world.
This is Donna Stewart from Sci-Fi Radio, and you're listening to No Boundaries Radio. They're a little messed up, but they're cool.
Welcome to the No Boundaries radio show. Are you ready for a wild ride in radio entertainment? Let's welcome our host, William Maltese, author of over 200 books, and JoJo from VampireWear, creator of jewelry and clothing for the undead. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the No Boundaries radio show. And our guest tonight is actor, author, and producer Robert LaSardo. Before we bring Robert on, though, William, what have you been doing this week, and what are you drinking tonight in honor of our guest?
Okay, as for doing, my sister came for a visit. My sister left. Some sunshine finally arrived, and I spent a couple of hours out in it, getting my vitamin D naturally instead of from a pharmaceutical bottle. And whatever spare time I've had, I've been devoted to the reading of our guest's latest fascinating book, Life Sentence, about which we'll be talking later. As for what I'm drinking, in homage of our guest, actor, author, poet, producer Robert LaSardo, what else but a Hollywood cocktail, which is 1.5 ounces vodka, 1.5 ounces Chambord, 1 ounce triple sec, a splash of sweetened lime juice, fill a cocktail shaker with ice, pour in all the ingredients, shake until chilled, strain into a cocktail glass, and garnish with a lime wedge. Bringing us to what you're up to and what you're drinking, if anything, JoJo.
I'm not as exciting as you. I'm having a ginger ale.
And Robert's having water. Well, yeah. I feel a little out of my...
That's okay, William.
Carry on.
VampireWear, I'm really happy to let people know that our guest tonight, Robert LaSardo's book, is available there. Life Sentence, a true story of love, lunacy, and fame. So if you go to VampireWear.com and click on the books link, and I've actually got it right on the main page, you can see Robert's book there, as well as all the great books that Corvus Nocturnum carries on Dark Moon Press. So that's great, and Corvus is in chat, so we'll give a shout-out to Corvus, whoop, whoop, and he's on the show next week. So that's very cool that we have Corvus next week talking about his Era America TV show and stuff. But enough of our stuff. Let's get to our awesome guest tonight. We got Robert LaSardo here. He's been on many TV shows and in movies like Death Race, Human Centipede, Ghost Whisperer, CSI Miami, CSI Las Vegas, and one of William and my favorites, Nip Tuck. And his book, Life Sentence, a true story of love, lunacy, and fame, is available now. So welcome to the show, Robert, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. This is a bit surreal, listening to you talk about this.
Yeah?
You're going to have a whole hour of that.
And I'm drinking water, William, yeah?
Yes, I know. Listen, Robert, thanks very much for being here tonight, first off. JoJo and I have read your book, Life Sentence, a true story of love, lunacy, and fame, and I have to say I enjoyed it very much, and I think a lot of our listeners will enjoy it too, if and when they pick it up. So although you're probably best known and recognizable for your movie and TV roles, I'd like to start out this evening by asking you about your book, and if you found writing a memoir particularly difficult.
Well, thank you, William, first of all, for the compliment on the book. I think that, I think not writing it would probably be more difficult. I think that, I think given the nature of my work, and many years I've devoted to impersonating other people, I felt like it was just necessary to reclaim what was left of me finally and speak for myself.
You found it cathartic?
It's just, I realized that there needed to be something else left behind, in my own words, that suggested something more than just arrogance or rebellion. A lot of the times I'm asked to, manifest various lessons in barbarism, some of the mythologies that I'm involved in fiction. And I think it's important, at least for me as a human being, as an artist, to embrace accountability, and consider the kind of influence that has on people, and the kind of what I'm putting into the world and how that affects other people. So I think it was a way for me to kind of, just come to terms with what that journey was like, how it affected me, and just kind of grab the bull by the horn, so to speak, and put down in my own words. Because for so long I felt puppeted by somebody else's concept, idea of me. And so, after a while, the line gets kind of blurred. The mirror, your sense of self gets a bit distorted. If you get, depending, some people, there's pretending, right? And then there's pretending. And the deeper you go, sometimes, it's hard to resurface and find a sense of reference for self. And so I think if you stay in that kind of gray area too long, man, you can get lost in it. And I think for me, writing it down and looking at it was a way to kind of re-establish a relationship with myself so that I could, understand what had happened, what was still happening, and how maybe I could, transcend some of it so that I can find balance within my life.
You actually have two other books out there, though. What? Choices, Inside Out, and Playing with Fire. Yes? Yeah. Mostly poetry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and did that, writing the poetry was different than writing the prose? I mean...
I think it was the beginning. I think it was the beginning of my exploration into communicating language, writing the words down, and mm-hmm. I think it was a few years ago, I think 4 or 5 years ago, I started to actually write stuff down, so I think it was the beginning of something that needed to happen, so the poetry, I think, was just kind of scratching the surface of a lot of the stuff that I carried with me for years. So, it was the introduction, I think, and seeing that also maybe it was important for me to share with others some of that experience, because I've been asked many questions over the years, especially about my communication, and the way I communicate myself through body modification, tattoos, etc. People wanted to know why. What does this mean? What are you communicating with this? Is it, because it's become so accepted by the mainstream to tattoo yourself, or to, people just, there's no limits these days to what people are doing as far as how they want to express themselves, So I come from a time when that exploration was a bit risky, you weren't, it wasn't so celebrated.
Yeah.
And so I think the poetry I wrote, combined with the tattoo imagery, was a way to communicate the experience of those images, what they meant to me, and also answer some questions through the prose and through the poetry for some of the people who wondered why or what it meant and what that experience was all about. Is there what's the content behind these images? Are they just on there to look cool, or are you saying something with this?
And the images in that book, correct, are your body tattoos, right?
Yeah. That is correct. Yeah.
As opposed to Playing with Fire again, which contains images and more poetry. Did you photograph those pictures? Because I noticed there were pictures, not so much of you, when I went through that book.
Yeah, I think that was more of an integration of the male and female. It was a kind of it was integration of male and female. That kind of you find your opposite sometimes in female form. At least for me as a man, I have found you attract what you are kind of a thing. So I found these pictures and this person that was willing to collaborate with me. And, based on what she was communicating with image, I felt a connection. And then I was inspired, kind of like a muse. I was inspired by what I saw, and I wrote about it. Triggered thoughts and feelings.
Are your first two books still available? I went looking like on Amazon and on Barnes & Noble, and I ended up finding them on some obscure sites. So are they available?
Yeah, I don't know actually. I've it's been some time, and I've kind of to me those books represent a period of time in my life where I was exploring the apparatus. I didn't even necessarily realize what I was doing. I was just exploring, as most artists do. I was just trying to find a way to communicate in a more authentic, sense than what I was being asked to do professionally. So, anyway, the point is that I've kind of lost track of that because, I try to live in the present and focus on, what's relevant now. So I feel a bit detached from that work. It's kind of like, when you draw a painting, or you play a role, you sing a song maybe 5-6 years ago, and you kind of try to revisit it. Sometimes it's not fresh in the memory, because it's, something that, represents a particular point in time, So for me, it's almost, that work almost seems abstract to me. Life Sentence, I think, is more relevant to, I think, where I am now and what needed to be communicated, because it's a much more detailed communication as far as a series of stages that I went through throughout my life. And I think it's more concrete as far as what it provides the reader. And I feel that the other works are a little bit more kind of abstract, ethereal, less to grab hold of. I think people are paying attention more to my work as a performer. Might get some of it. I don't think it was something that everybody would understand. And I think the challenge when you write is to try to find a way to bring the words to life for others to feel. Requires you to turn your mind inside out. And you lose yourself in that experience to find something new. So you're basically like creating an interactive situation with your reader as they journey and discover things along with you. And that's what I try to do with Life Sentence. I want to take the reader by the hand with me and have them, experience, some of the things that I looked at throughout life and how they affected me. And
do you find the writing? Do you find the writing more difficult than the performing?
Actually, I found the writing to be less disingenuous. I mean, at times I feel with performing, what people have projected in their writing or their perception of me. Sometimes it's tumultuous to the psyche. Sometimes it rips the psyche apart because you have to, at least for me, I have to go to places that are not always comfortable. But then you have to kind of you embrace it, and after a while it just kind of becomes where you are, and you do it, And so, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on you. It doesn't, So I think, to answer your question, the writing I felt was a little bit more liberating. I felt that I finally was in a position where I could communicate without limitation. I could just write what I felt. I could explain things in a way that made sense to me in the hopes that others could relate to it, because it wasn't just about me. It was about trying to connect with so many people I've come across in my travels in life, because I've traveled a lot, and trying to just either answer the questions that have been asked me, questions I've asked myself, questions that people have asked me, and just write it down in story format with various philosophies, and just share those experiences so that others may be also, maybe find some sense of meaning in it, and it could maybe help other people to maybe, because I think sometimes people feel alone, and I think they need somebody that they can relate to. They feel that they share an experience with. They don't know quite why, but then if you put it down in word, the way I did, I think my hope is that they'll get. I'm giving them an authentic experience. I'm providing them with an honest communication. I'm not, even though it's ironic that the work that I do, basically you're getting paid to lie, to impersonate somebody that you're not. But sometimes that impersonation can be so effective, it sears its way into the collective psyche so that people can't differentiate that character from who you are. So I think as a remedy, I needed to communicate a different thought into the world and share with people who've been affected by what I do. And I felt a sense of responsibility to share that thought with them and stories and what I experienced in Hollywood, what I experienced growing up as a child, what I experienced in family, what I experienced in addiction. I felt that responsibility. This was going to be the last thing I ever communicated as an artist before I left the planet. I felt an obligation to share that with people who've been affected by what I've put into the world, what I've, as an artist, what I've projected into the universe. I wanted to at least have that put down so someone could read it, and then let others decide, how they perceive it, because everybody has their own perception of things. I just needed to be honest with myself and to those who have been paying attention, been kind enough to pay attention to my particular evolution within media, within writing, etc.
Yes, because your book certainly does give a different perception of what could be misconstrued by seeing some of the dark work and dark characters that you've played, because that's really not you. So, yeah, I see that.
Yeah. William, there's just one final thing I wanted to say in regard to what you said about this idea of the nefarious quality of characters. But an interesting quote from a book called The Prophet, Kahlil Gibran. He wrote, "For what is evil but good tortured by its own hunger and thirst?" So I think if you're deprived long enough the experience to dance, or a certain dance, so if you're locked in a box, so to speak, and you're not allowed to sing a certain note, you're only, after a while, it can be the artist collapses within themselves, and so then it just becomes a condition rather than a circumstance to grow and to progress. And then rather than growing, you're facing extinction rather than an evolution.
Very good. Yes, I agree.
Putting your website in chat and that while we were talking, there was people in there, they didn't realize that you had been in the military, and they want to thank you for serving. And I wanted to ask, because you went to the School of Performing Arts in New York, which is really cool because that's the show that Fame was based on. And we were just wondering, when you got out of school there, like you did acting there, but then you decided to go into the Navy after. So what made you decide military and then back to acting again?
Well, I don't know, death maybe. Sometimes when you see your own death coming, you have to get, you have to make changes in your life. Sometimes something instinctive just tells you, and not in a morbid sense. I don't mean it like, ooh, kind of thing. I just mean it that when you see people around you making choices in your life, young men, and the choices they're making are destructive, but then this part of you that wants to, it's like there's this part of you that knows that there's more, but you don't know quite how to make that manifest because you're not even in a situation where you can make it manifest because there's not some people around helping you. But I was fortunate to have a teacher at least that kind of guided me a bit while I was in performing arts, and basically told me, please don't lose sense, or don't lose sense of your creative self. So despite your surroundings and all the things and the variables that are around you, don't scapegoat that. Transcend it, basically. Those weren't the words, but in retrospect, that's how I perceive it. So the military was kind of like my own way of policing my psyche. It was a way of policing myself. Instinctively, I knew that I had to go into the military. I mean, I was getting into a lot of trouble, and I caught a case when I was younger. I had to stand before a judge, et cetera, and all that. So, with that happening and going to school, there was this paradox between, artist on one side and then, this getting into trouble. And I was, influenced by others in a sense, but I think I was also dealing with my own aggression, because of some of the things that happened early on in life. So the military and some of the movies I saw as a kid, I was affected by a lot of the old black and white, films, World War II, a lot of the propaganda, that machine that, kind of encouraged men to enlist and fight for the country and all that, be patriotic. So I was affected by that mythology. And so the imagination, can't speak tonight. The part of me that utilizes the imagination saw like this, this great big world. And I thought, well, I'll go in the Navy, man. I'll sail the seven seas. I'll pretend I'm, Sinbad or something, travel around. And so that to me was a way to get away from, what I saw, which is a world kind of collapsing in on itself. The world that I was living in, the home situation, my friends, everything. So the military made sense. And then once I got out, while I was in the military, I stayed in touch with my teacher from school, and he continued to remind me, hey, please don't forget that creative part of yourself. So when I got out of the military, I reconnected with him, and I started studying with him again, and started auditioning. And next thing you know, I'm working.
Yeah, that's really kudos to the teacher, too, for staying in touch and realizing that was, should be your path, right?
Yeah, I mean, angelic, man. It's like part of the angelic host. These type of entities or people, whatever you want to call them, give it a name. They come into periods, come in different times in your life, and they're there. And I'm just grateful for that. I'm grateful for people like that. So, yeah.
I had another question in chat here. You used to train the attack dogs. That's right?
Right.
And so they're just wondering if you had any pets now.
Not at the moment. No, I've been traveling a little bit too much for that. So, but no.
No pets?
No, but no, not at the moment.
So you worked with Navy attack dogs at that listing station in the Aleutians?
Yeah, I was, and I was in boot camp. They asked who, if anybody wanted to, request. They asked us if we wanted to, if anybody was interested in overseas duty. So I figured, hey, maybe I'll catch some kind of tour over in Europe or something. So I raised my hand. Next thing I know, I'm in the Aleutian Islands, and I'm like, okay. And so that was, I asked one of my shipmates, like, my orders came in, and I saw on the order, it said ADAC, Alaska, ADAC. I'm like, where's ADAC? And it's like, that's in Alaska, in the Aleutian Islands, like right below the Bering Strait, right below Russia. So I spent 2 years up there, and when I got there, I was asked if I had a choice between the fire department or the security department. I chose security. So it's ironic that I chose a profession that is diametrically opposed to a lot of the characters I played in fiction world. I was a cop basically, MP, working with attack dogs. So
I was reading, Robert, that your next film is going to be a Devon Downs, Kenny Gage horror movie called Parlor that you filmed in all places, Vilnius, Lithuania. Can you tell us a little about that? Is it still in pre-production, or is it on its way?
Yeah, it's basically in pre-production, and I was lucky enough to have these two gentlemen who were I think both geniuses, and had an unusual opportunity because in a world where people don't really get people don't take the time to get to know other people, especially within the realm of work that I do. They both were very interested in meeting me, and I them, and we just sat down. We found we had a lot of things in common. Aside from wanting to collaborate with me, we just found that we developed a relationship and a friendship, and and then I think from that, they were able to put their heads together and come up with a concept and create the story, and kind of channel me some of the conversations we had and some of the ideologies that I shared with them, and into this character that is nothing like I've ever experienced before. A character that is relatively intelligent and insightful man who goes through a series of acts through the storyline unscathed. And for me that's unusual because most of the time I usually don't survive the third act. Something happens. So it was just nice to have a couple of men in a position of power to that believed in my ability to communicate a character with a full arc like that had some sensibility, humor, and some insight. So that was the first. So we had a good time over there.
I think it surprises a lot of people that Hollywood is actually a very insular community in that you don't really, actors aren't friends with all actors, and producers aren't friends with all actors or with other producers or directors. They're just kind of there where people just think you hobnob with these people and are good friends with them all the time, and that's really not the case, is it?
Well, I'll just speak for myself. I don't know how it is for other people. I would say for myself, it's a bit, I don't know. It's real, and it's showbiz. It's pretend. I think that a lot of the alliances are formed out of necessity to create something, and it deals with imagination and pretending. And I think sometimes that bleeds over into personal relationships. And because it's kind of a circus type life where you're moving around a lot, it doesn't breed the type of structure that conventional relationships require. So a lot of times they don't. Once the film is over, a lot of the relationships go the way of the wind. They just kind of disintegrate. Every now and then, though, you link up with somebody and you actually stay in communication with them. But it's basically a carnival. We're the original carnies. So. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't lend itself to long-lasting relationships, which sometimes can be a good thing, because I think a lot of artists have this kind of gypsy blood in them. They want to keep moving. They want to keep, having new experiences and meeting new people and trying different things, taking risks. I mean, ideally, that's what you want to do, evolve as an artist and have different experiences with different people. So a positive note, I'd say, yeah, I mean, it's not the most cohesive kind of situation. So, you learn that. And if you come from a background where your life is basically like a latchkey kid, you've been moving around a lot, it's synonymous with that already. So it's nothing new for you, So I guess, we just kind of find, our place and our people, so to speak, for a period of time, and then we move on, until we find the next circus show to go, to kind of thing.
Does Parlor have a tentative release date? And a distributor already?
There's a lot of information about that. I mean, I can't give specifics. I know, I don't know for certain. I think that they have some. I know that they have some plans to release the film this year, or possibly. And there's some talk of festival, etc. I mean, there's some stuff that I'm very excited about that film and Human Centipede as well. I'm not really at liberty to speak about either films in detail. I can just say that I'm very optimistic about both films, and I think that I feel really good about it. I feel very fortunate to finally be given a chance to work with a few directors that are just fearless and doing things that are cutting edge and allowing me an opportunity, just like the book that I wrote, a chance to communicate something with a little bit more substance, so that's kind of nice. Which is why I wrote the book, just an opportunity to get away from the Hollywood diatribe, and kind of get closer to the authentic aspect of that experience in communicating in word. And I think that these directors understood that too, and are allowing me, through a particular storyline and a character development, to show that as well.
And Human Centipede, that's Human Centipede number 3, actually, is Tom Six?
Yeah,
okay. And had you worked with him before? Or?
No.
Oh,
I've never worked with him. He reached out to me, and we had a very nice conversation. He's a very sweet man, a considerate man, respectful man, and I give what I get.
Actually, I was surprised to find that you have a certain flair for the comedic, and especially in the dark comedies. Like I was looking at trailers from Junkie and Bad Samaritans. Do you enjoy the comedy aspects?
I enjoy anything that gives me flexibility. Yeah, I mean, I like to be able to breathe like a fine wine, man. I like an opportunity. If I'm going to run, let me run the whole field, man. Let me run around a bit. Let me loosen up. Let me stretch out a bit. So yeah, any type of situation that's gets away from the conventional mainstream kind of way of thinking and doing things, that's radical, that stirs things up, that gets people thinking, that shakes the ground, the foundations of what people, think they know. I want to be a part of, because I think, true creativity is, to some extent, is about, shaking things up, and maybe helping, trying to, like I said, more like earlier about the book, creating an interactive experience, stimulating people, so maybe they can look at feelings they never knew they had, or So yeah, in that sense, I'd like to work with people and be involved in films that go to the edge, push the envelope, that are controversial. Junkie was such a film. Working with Daniel Rivas and Adam Mason, they were fearless in what they created, and I was grateful that they offered me that role, and I was able to collaborate with them.
Okay, well, we wanted to get more about your book, and I had read a review from your book. It's getting very good reviews on Amazon. What a reviewer had said is, I think it can help a lot of people out there like me with a less than perfect upbringing. LaSardo gives the readers hope for not all is lost just because you've had a hard life. Reading this book, you don't feel like you're reading a celebrity's biography, so it's easy for the average person to connect. So this must make you feel good. And do you talk to a lot of like people that have read the book? Do they email you and such?
Well, first, Giorgio, I'd just like to say a couple of things. I want to give a couple of shouts out to a couple of people that I think I need to.
Okay.
First off, I'd like to thank Kimberly Alvarez, who's my manager. I think that she's amazing, and I just want to thank her for being dedicated to her clients and believing in me. And her enthusiasm just goes a really long way. And I wouldn't be talking to you right now if it wasn't for her. You know what I mean? So I'm just grateful that I was able to connect with her. I'm just grateful that I was able to connect with Corvus over at the Dark Moon Press for publishing my book. I want to thank them for publishing my book. Yeah. But so to answer your question, I just I haven't received any emails from anybody. I've heard some people say that they enjoyed the book, so I'm glad. I'm grateful. I'm just grateful that I was able to put it down, to write it, to get it out, so that maybe if one person could be affected by it, if it could help somebody, if it gives somebody some hope. I think the whole point of this interview wasn't necessarily to kind of like revamp my career in Hollywood. It was actually to kind of get away from that and to focus on how you keep your sanity in the midst of all that. And I think this book, I'd like to believe the book is a way, it's cathartic in the sense, as William said, is a way to exercise and confess a lot of that experience. And so if there's, and it's not necessarily just related to that zip code in Hollywood. I think it's just I feel that my background, because I've traveled, or at least I've had a variety of experiences, a variety of experiences with different people from all walks of life. I just feel that, it was my responsibility to just share that information with people, because I've been being asked the questions in public by people, hey, tell me your story. Hey, some people want to talk about things. And now we're living in a time where to be, I guess to express yourself in not so conventional form is actually cool now, right? So I'm being invited into forums like this one, and, to speak with you, Jojo, and to speak with you, William, about my experience, where years ago, it was a problem with this. There was a problem with looking the way I did, etc. So it was fun for me to also to write it down and feel okay that I could actually communicate this experience and share it with people who also may feel a bit, put in the corner, with the dunce cap, not allowed to, participate, in all the reindeer games like the Rudolph story. Like we all, some of us feel like we've been consigned to the island of misfit toys.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I wanted to speak to all the people, those who feel like that, because I feel that way. I felt that kind of on the outside, looking in my whole life. In that sense, an anarchist. So I just wanted to connect with people that have given me respect and love over the years through what I do, and have been able to see through the facade of what Hollywood has projected onto me and see something that maybe there's something more. So I felt a responsibility to share that with them, and also to myself to come clean with those experiences from childhood and into Hollywood, and then after that, in retrospect, and share that with people.
Well, in looking into your writing, I saw you were a contributing writer in Letters to My Bully, which was really great. And I just wondered, with something like that, have you thought about doing motivational speaking at all, or?
Yeah, I've thought about it. I've spoken with some people who are excited to get me involved in situations like that. Yeah, so I'm hoping that it's like that saying, in that film, if you build it, they will come. So I'm hoping that as I communicate more with people and listen to them share their stories with me, and then I can share back, then maybe these platforms will manifest. I like to believe that if you put your energy into things and put it out there, that it happens.
Corvus, and he's in chat, and he was saying that you had conventions coming up too, like people can come and meet you.
Yeah. There's been a lot of traveling this year. I went to Germany. I was invited to Germany to do a convention there. I'm going to Switzerland soon to do a convention. So yeah, there's been quite a few platforms for me to get involved and meet fans and talk about a variety of things. The book, or just anything. Just I kind of feel like I've been isolated for very long, and now it's just time to kind of spread wings and fly and just to meet people and talk, and it's interesting to observe the reaction when they meet and talk to me, because like I said, you don't realize the impact you make with people, I mean, it's not like I'm not watching the stuff I do. I mean, I don't even always recognize myself, the eye I perceive within myself isn't the eye necessarily that I hear talking back. Like if I hear a tape recording of myself, or if I watch a film, like it's almost odd to me, so I don't necessarily, so when I see how people react, it's interesting. And when I start dialoguing with them, it's wonderful, because then you can have fun, and talk. And sometimes I think some people are actually shocked, because, they don't expect, I think, the disposition that I portray. They don't expect, what they see in public or in person. I think they're kind of surprised.
Do you watch everything that you do? Do you replay it and critique yourself? Decide what you could do differently? Well,
in the beginning, William, I used to do that when I first started, and because it's just the shock of being invited into the Hollywood, to the Emerald City. Because at that stage in my life, you see it as this kind of place, this magical place that is forbidden. And to be anointed, so to speak, and be invited into the realm, and be allowed to participate with people, with like celebrities, or basically demigods, and people perceived to be bigger than life. It was overwhelming. So yeah, at first I just was fascinated by the construct itself. So yeah, when the movies came out, the first film I did a film for Warner Brothers Studio with legendary comedian Richard Pryor, and that was surreal. Just to be standing next to him. A year prior to that, I was in the military overseas, and then a year later, here I am standing with Richard Pryor doing this film. So it was bizarre. So yeah, I did go and see the films. I was excited. I was, it was frightening too to watch it, because you can't even believe it's happening. So yeah, in the beginning, I did a lot of that. I watched it, I critiqued it, I got involved, and then I started to find that it was not always helpful to do that. I found that to just get involved in the material itself and remove judgment and just do the work and trust that the people that were running the show, that wrote it for me, that they knew what they were doing, and that I can just let go of that tendency to try to control things that I had no control. Once I realized that I didn't write the material, I wasn't responsible for the editing, etc. Because inevitably what happens is the disappointment factor. If you set high expectation and you wait for the stuff to come out, then inevitably the critique comes, the criticism comes, and so you go from this really extreme high to a low. And so you've worked many years, many auditions, all this competition, tremendous stress to try to make impact in a realm, with the people that run the show. You want to affect them. You want them to continue to hire you. You want, ideally you would like to have respect from your peers, from fellow actors. But when sometimes there's so much of that show is out of your control, you have to let go at some point, and you can't really get too caught up in the results of your work. And you can, but I've seen people go crazy. They get you make yourself sick with that expectation. So at least for me, I learned over time to try to dismantle that and just do the best I can and just continue to do that. As long as I know that I did that, then I just have to kind of let go. And sometimes I would watch some of the work out of respect for those who created it. And other times I just move on to the next thing. As long as the director was happy, or the people that hired me were happy, and the audience were affected, that was enough for me. I did not want to look in that mirror anymore. I was like, what, enough of the mirror. I just need to get involved in being connected to the material, doing the best work I can, and everything else is out of my control. And so, it can become like a drug too, because you get attached to something doing really well, then you get high, and then there's a low. And so I didn't want to be on that yo-yo anymore. But you know what? I want to get off this ride. I just want to keep going forward. Just keep creating.
So when you're in a role, when you have a role of a particular badass character, do you find it difficult to leave that character on the set and come back and pick it up like the next day for another shoot, or do you take it home with you and feel miserable?
I think the misery comes in, William, with sleep deprivation. I think sometimes because the material can be very, evocative emotionally, and also, it's very violent sometimes. What you have to immerse yourself into this kind of aggressive psyche. I think even when you remove the element of judgment and you don't judge your characters, you just do the work. Still, because what you're conjuring sometimes it affects the way you sleep. You start your psyche starts to vibrate like the character. So if the character is hyper accelerated or paranoid or aggressive or whatever, sometimes it can be difficult to disconnect that and then just come home, have some tea, take a bath or whatever, and burn some candles, some incense, whatever, and just go to sleep. The motion of the day prior is still going. So to stop that locomotive sometimes seems almost impossible. So no matter, even if you try with various rituals to disconnect from the day and not bring it home, it's still there. It's still somewhere in the room, and at least for me, I've noticed that it affects my sleep. And sometimes it's not easy for me to sleep. So I find a lot of the time when I'm working, I'm sleep deprivated. But the good news is that when you're sleep deprivated, you just have enough energy to do the work. So the ego kind of goes to sleep. So you don't really get caught up in that aspect of self that watches you, your own part of you that observes you doing the work. Doesn't do that anymore. You're so raw because you've been reduced to just enough energy to function that sometimes that can create a very real experience that occurs. So there's no room for there's no energy left to support the ego structure. So you're actually just the character. That's all that's happening. You're doing the work, and as long as the director gives you the thumbs up, then you move on to the next thing. So in that sense, sometimes being exhausted and overtired can be useful, because it gives you just enough energy and focus to just do the job and not focus on anything else.
Yeah, and if you're playing like an angry guy and you're not getting enough sleep, you can just take that with you to work, right?
Yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah. We had a question here, too, if there was any roles that you were offered that you turned down that you wish you'd done later?
Well, yeah, I think there was and I talk about this in the book. I think, at the stage of my life when I was working on the soap opera, there was a couple of things I lacked. I dare say I still lack it. It's still a work in progress. But I think there was some humility that I needed. I had it, but I needed more, given the circumstance of that particular professional, that setting, and in that that environment, that professional setting. Because I'd never worked on a soap opera before, and I didn't understand the in-house politics. And the character that was offered me, I played a priest, or I played a couple of characters, like a twin brother or something. But and so I think, I think in retrospect, because of course everything's 20/20 hindsight. You look back and think, oh, if I would have, could have, should have, but I didn't have the experience that I do now and the understanding of the politic play. Sometimes, or always, that occurs within situations like that, and how to communicate myself to people in power, and also didn't understand the mechanism of agencies and how they operate. And sometimes the business that they do isn't always, kosher, so to speak. So I had to learn the hard way to have that a lesson too. So, and in retrospect, I wish that if I could go back and I could relive an experience, I wish I would have accepted a certain role and continued on with that for a while to explore a character that, might have had a little bit more dynamic and layers than I was used to being offered. So yeah, I've had that experience on the soap opera.
You have excellent book promotion possibilities, though, in the fact that, these conventions that you can attend book conventions, tattoo conventions, movie conventions. Yeah, I'm very excited about that. I feel really good about that because it's just it's a way to interact with people and to meet the fans, to meet people. And at the end of the day, it's like I don't necessarily feel like. I'm just a guy, out there, and talking with people, and I'm glad that they're affected by what I do, and I'm glad that they, give respect and love, and I give it back, and so it's a good opportunity to just talk and meet people, and
and that work in the industry, your brethren, so to speak, other actors, other performers, talk to them, share war stories, so to speak, make relationships with promoters and stuff. And so, in that sense, you're also, it's a way of marketing, I dare say, too, you're getting out there. It's not just simply, you're not just a vendor, for me at least, because, I have new movies that are coming out, so I see it as also as a great opportunity that I'm allowed by promoters to promote films that are coming out, given a platform to talk about Parlor, to talk about Human Centipede, talk about Long Day Journey. I got a couple of films that haven't been released yet, so I'm just excited that I have that forum to utilize, not to kind of move forward and focus on what's in the present, too.
Yeah, that's great because you can cover so many different kinds of conventions, and like you said, when you're promoting the movies as well, then people can talk to you about your book, and it's excellent.
That's why I'm really grateful for Kimberly and our relationship, because she's shown me a world that I never even knew existed. I didn't know that people even did this.
William, before we run out of time, we have to make sure. I've been putting Robert's website in chat here, but just if you want to let everybody know, Robert, like your Facebook and any place where you want people to see you.
Well, just with respect to Corvus, like I said, when we started this, I said it was surreal because just a couple of years ago, I was sitting down writing notes and communicating thought and feeling and spirit and blood on paper, because I needed to get it out. And here I am talking with you, Jojo. Thank you once again for having me on the show. And I just want to thank Corvus and darkmoonpress.com for publishing my book. Because if anything, this interview for me it's cathartic, because I'm just grateful to have an opportunity to speak about that type of communication. Because for so long it's been the other. Not that there's been anything wrong with that, but I think it's time to communicate another aspect of self to people who know that there's more there. So I feel it's a responsibility to share that with other people. So I'm just grateful for that. So I'll just plug the darkmoonpress.com. Thank you again, Corvus, and thank you, Kimberly, for creating those relationships and making that happen.
And Corvus rocks, right, William?
Yes, indeed.
He does. His website and everything that he does, and all the authors now, it's inspiring for other people.
Yeah, it's always been a revolution of the mind, a revolution of the spirit. It's just great to get up every day and face those challenges. And it's great that there's people that are sensitive to that in the world, that that assist other people, so we can all collaborate and work together. As opposed to the other mentality, that just to capture and capture and exploit it and turn it into something that it really isn't. I'm glad that the people that are not afraid to, like yourself and others, to talk real talk, man. So just we break it down, and it's not always so tailored and neat and tidy like in mainstream media. But so what? We're not always getting. A lot of times we're not getting the truth of what's really occurring with people in mainstream media, except a lot of the gossip forms and the explosiveness that occurs in the drama play and the Jerry Springer type of antics that occur. It's not necessarily increasing our knowledge or assisting us as creators, but it's just part of the, it's the Roman, it's the Colosseum mentality. Yeah, and I know all about that. Trust me, I know all about the blood sport. So it's nice to be a part of the family now, so to speak, that is trying to communicate, whatever variety of expression that encourages life, encourages the artist, that communicates something that helps people stand up, not collapse in on themselves in mediocrity. They feel that they have a voice. We all have a voice. Doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. We all have something to say. And that's what I also find at the convention is very useful. I learn so much from meeting so many different people.
Corvus is in chat, and he said that much love to you, Robert, and he treasures you. So, with that being said, next week on the show, we have the author and owner of Dark Moon Press, Corvus Nocturnum. And, of course, he published our guest tonight, Robert LaSardo's book, Life Sentence, A True Story of Love and Lunacy and Fame. And Corvus is working on getting Eerie America on television, so we're going to hear all about that. And we're looking forward to Corvus next week. And yes, thank you, Robert, so much for being on the show tonight. It's really, really great.
Amen.
Thank you, Jojo. Thank you, William. It's my pleasure as well. Thank you both.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, everybody. And everybody, have a great night. And make sure you tune in next Wednesday for No Boundaries Radio. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Ciao.